Batman and Robin are arguably one of the most famous duos in history, thanks in no small part to the phenomena that was the 1960s TV series starring Adam West and Burt Ward. This show briefly burned very brightly, so much so that it left an imprint on our collective consciousness. There's scarcely a person that isn't familiar with Robin's unique form of exclamation.
Holy schizophrenia.
However, not every fan of Batman is a fan of Robin. There was a period after the 60s show ended that the comic book writers tried to distance themselves from the campy antics by shipping Robin off to university, relegating him to a backup strip and away from Gotham City. And this got me thinking, does Batman really need Robin? I'm going to make an argument that I think answers the question fairly well, but I'm certain there will be people that completely disagree with me, and that's okay. First things first, keep in mind that this channel is primarily a DC Animated Universe channel, so I'm focusing on the way Robin was used in Batman the Animated Series, and I'm only going to talk about Dick Grayson for now. Tim Drake was Robin in the new Batman Adventures, which was a separate show, despite what the BTAS DVDs try to tell us, so he will be covered in a separate video later on. However, before getting to BTAS, we need to talk about Robin's comic book origins. Robin was introduced in 1940's Detective Comics 38, barely a year after Batman's debut, by Bob Kane, Bill Finger and Jerry Robinson. Robin is another in a long line of early DC characters whose appearance was inspired by figures seen on the silver screen, in this case Errol Flynn's Robin Hood, although they would later say they took inspiration from the bird. Robin is, in many ways, the opposite of Batman. While Batman is a dark, brooding symbol of the night, Robin is young, energetic and brightly coloured. He has a youthful enthusiasm, which complements Batman's stoic grimness. He's intended to take the edge off, preventing Batman stories from becoming too dour. Robin is young Richard Dick Grayson, member of the Flying Graysons family, a trio of trapeze artists consisting of Dick and his parents John and Mary Grayson. One day, tragedy strikes when a gangster, Boss Zuko, has Dick's parents killed after the circus owner refuses to pay him protection money. The Graysons would suffer a fatal accident where their trapeze wire broke mid-act, leading to them falling to their death in front of a packed audience. Dick would later hear Zuko's men shaking down the circus owner, saying that there'll be a lot more accidents like that if he doesn't pay up. Dick's first instinct is to go to the police, but Batman intervenes, telling him he'd be killed within the hour because Zuko owns the town. Instead, Batman would take the boy in and use him in his war on organised crime, eventually tasking him with photographing Zuko murdering someone, which was irrefutable proof that couldn't be swept under the rug, to bring him to justice. And that was Robin's primary role, a capable assistant that the criminals would underestimate. He'd also act as the voice of the audience, asking Batman how he solved particular cases, and would raise the tension of scenes by being imperiled by the villains, like that time he was thrown off a bridge by Clayface. Robin's inclusion was a very clear attempt by the writers to lighten the tone of the Batman comics, making them more appealing to children. That's not to say from the moment Robin was created it was all sunshine and rainbows, far from it. They still fought murderers and psychopaths. It just opened up different storytelling opportunities. For instance, there's no way Batman could infiltrate a school as a student or pretend to be a newsboy, as much as it would amuse me to see him try. As I mentioned in the opening, Robin is likely most synonymous with the 1966 Batman TV series, with Burt Ward's completely earnest, pun-loaded performance. He would popularise the image of Robin as a scrappy, enthusiastic kid, perpetually seeking Batman's approval. In an effort to distance themselves from this campy interpretation of the character, in 1969 the comic book version of Robin was sent away to university, becoming his own hero in his own environment. Despite being a young adult, he kept the same costume until he took on a new identity of his own, Nightwing, in the 1980s. But that's a topic for a future video. Since his creation, Dick Grayson has appeared in almost 10,000 comics, so it really wouldn't be possible to highlight every single one of them. Hell, I'm not even sure how long it would take me to read 10,000 comics. Months? Years? Regardless, there is one thing about Robin that remains true to this day. He was conceived as a character for younger readers to identify with, the logic being that while children look up to Batman, he's hopefully hard to relate to. Child audiences could identify with Robin and imagine themselves as him teaming up with Batman in his crusade against crime. He was the first child sidekick to a superhero, and due to his success, a legion of them would follow in the decades to come. So with his comic book origins out of the way, let's get to the 1990s, when television executives mandated that Robin be included in their new show, Batman the Animated Series. It may have made some fans' eyes roll, including my own, but they were probably right to push for Robin to be included in the show, given the fact that he had made the Batman comics and TV series incredibly popular. However, Batman endangering a child by having them join him on his nightly crusade to rid Gotham of crime is problematic. Not only is it flagrant child endangerment, but you run the risk of undermining your villain's credibility if their schemes are consistently foiled by a 10-year-old. Fortunately, when BTAS went into production at Fox, one of the rules established by the network was that children could not be endangered, so they opted to age Robin up, making him a student at university, a clear reference to the late 60s and early 70s Batman comics. The fact that Robin was an adult living elsewhere allowed them to pick up and use Robin when they needed him. When they wanted to tell dark and gloomy stories featuring a solo Batman, they could still do that. Viewers wouldn't be wondering why Robin didn't help Batman fight Mr. Freeze and Heart of Ice, because he was probably off at college. In terms of Robin's physical appearance in BTAS, he more closely resembled the third comic book Robin, Tim Drake. Note that he doesn't wear little trunks and pixie shoes, instead he has a more practical outfit. Similarly, his hair was a bit more stylish. In terms of his personality, however, he is very clearly Dick Grayson. He makes quips, which breaks the tension in some of the more dour episodes. He's scrappy, energetic, and isn't afraid to fight dirty. While Batman would never punch someone in the balls, Robin has no issue with doing it. In terms of episodes, in the initial run of 65 episodes, Robin only appeared in about 15 of them. This classifies him as a regular recurring character rather than a co-star, and I think that's an important distinction to make. And of those episodes, I'd argue that only a small number of them gave him a significant role. While he is featured prominently in episodes like If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Rich and Christmas with the Joker, if he hadn't been there, then much of the story would have played out in a similar way. His most important story comes in the two-parter Robin's Reckoning. This story acts as Robin's origin story and is the first time it was ever depicted on screen. Robin learns that the man who was responsible for his parents' death, Tony Zuko, has resurfaced and sets out to get revenge. This story is a great showcase for both Batman and Robin's personalities and how they respond to emotional pain. In an effort to protect Robin, Batman pushes him away and refuses to allow him to work on capturing Zuko. Batman fears that Zuko would harm Robin, physically harm him by potentially killing him, but also spiritually if things go the other way and Robin gives in to his desire for vengeance. Batman puts up an emotional brick wall, refusing to let Robin be involved in the case. He would rather risk his own safety to spare Robin, despite the damage it does to their relationship. Robin, meanwhile, has complete tunnel vision, focusing on getting his revenge on Zuko. Seeing Robin so angry is actually kind of jarring, and it's a stark contrast to how he was behaving at the beginning of the episode during the construction scene fight, which was a clear callback to Detective Comics 38. When Robin learns the name of the mobster behind the scam, he becomes furious. He is not himself, so you can see why Batman didn't want him anywhere near the case. The two-parter is often listed on fan best episode lists, although it misses out on the top 10 of mine. Sorry, Robin fans. There's lots to like about the episode. The moment where the Grayson's broken trapeze swings into frame, making it clear what has happened, is one of the series' most beautiful and creative scenes. The TV censors wouldn't allow a gratuitous depiction of death, so the team had to come up with a more creative way of suggesting what had happened, and they really knocked it out of the park with that scene. For an episode about Robin, we don't actually see much of him, and when we do see him, he's not himself. If anything, he acts more like Batman. Similarly, much of the two-parter is set in the past, before Dick Grayson became Robin. Yeah, sure, they are the same person, but they may as well be different characters because they act in very different ways. Young Dick Grayson is sad, but he's also angry and determined. Yet, despite being fairly capable, for instance saving this Betty Page-inspired Lady of the Night from her pimp, he is still only a child. When he comes across Zuko, his emotions get the better of him and he winds up taking a dunk in the river. Batman has to choose between capturing Zuko and saving Dick, as if that was even a question. Batman always chooses to save a life over apprehending a felon. Seeing Dick's determination, Batman decides to let him into his inner circle and begins to train him to harness his negative feelings. I have to think that by starting his training at a much younger age than Bruce did, Dick was able to process his feelings of despair from his parents' death, leading to him becoming a more well-rounded individual. Having said that, it's clear that the pain of his loss was never truly gone, as demonstrated by the drastic change in attitude once Zuko reappears. He was able to cover it up with humour, which is a common coping mechanism for the clinically depressed. What better way to push away those bad feelings than to crack a joke, eh? When Robin does eventually get his hands on Zuko, he reverts to the same attitude he had as a child, only this time he's a fully grown adult that has been trained by one of the world's greatest fighters. Sucks to be you, Zuko! There is a brief moment where it seems like Robin might go through with his plan to kill him. However, Batman is able to reason with him and talks him down. A similar situation arises in the episode I Am the Knight, except the roles between Batman and Robin are switched. When Batman becomes disillusioned after Commissioner Gordon gets shot during a raid gone wrong, it's Robin that tries to talk Batman out of his funk. While it doesn't seem like his words have made a difference, it's only when Dick decides to step up to protect Gotham that Batman gets his act together. This is a neat flipping of their relationship. It goes to show that everybody has their bad days, even Batman. All we can do is allow ourselves to express the negative feelings to get them out, brush it off, and pick ourselves back up. One thing that leaps out at me is that once Batman gets back in the game, he tells Robin that he's not needed. I don't really see why Robin couldn't help with capturing Jazzman and protecting Commissioner Gordon, but it emphasises this notion that, at the end of the day, Robin isn't necessary in Batman's war on crime. I'd argue that the next most important Robin episode is Fear of Victory, in which Robin must overcome his fears after being exposed to the Scarecrow's potent new fear powder, which is a similar experience to Batman's in the Scarecrow's debut episode Nothing to Fear. There's no antidote for this version of the toxin. Instead, Robin has to overcome its effects through perseverance. He spends much of the episode cowering, but doesn't give up, and at the end of the episode saves the crowd at the stadium by making a timely catch. Some may dislike the fact that Robin spends most of the episode trembling in fear at the slightest bit of trouble, but I enjoy this episode because Dick shows true strength by overcoming his fears. In other episodes, Robin acts as a valuable assistant, using his powers of disguise to impersonate Bruce Wayne in The Strange Secret of Bruce Wayne, and creates an opportunity for Batman to defeat Kyodai Ken without Summer Gleason witnessing the fight in Night of the Ninja. He also does fairly well in a one-on-one fight with Kyodai, but that might simply be because Kyodai underestimated him. But then there are episodes where Robin's only role is to be in peril, motivating Batman. In The Demon's Quest, he's kidnapped, leading to Batman's globe-trotting adventure to rescue him, and that's about it for his role in the story. He really doesn't do much else, other than fly the rescue plane. Similarly, in a later episode, Bane, he attempts to take on the titular mercenary, but is no match for him. Even Candace, Rupert Thorne's duplicitous secretary, gives him a run for his money. Following the first 65 episodes of Batman the Animated Series, the show was rebranded as The Adventures of Batman and Robin, in an attempt to tap into the elusive young child demographic. While Robin featured in 14 of the 20 episodes, there aren't any episodes where he feels like an essential part of the story, despite being upgraded to the role of co-star. Sure, he plays a part in episodes like Baby Doll, disguising himself as the actor playing Cousin Spunky. He investigates one of the leads in Harvey Dent's kidnapping in Second Chance, and provides a vital clue to Poison Ivy's scheme in House and Garden. But there are no stories like Robin's Reckoning, where he plays a major role. Dick Grayson also appears in Batman and Mr. Freeze Subzero, a home video movie that was intended to coincide with the release of Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin, but the Warner's executives decided to delay it by a full calendar year because they didn't want their summer blockbuster being outshined by a home release animated film. He has a bigger role in this film. It was very much intended to shine the spotlight on his blossoming romance with Barbara Gordon, but again, much of the film would have been the same if he hadn't appeared in it. He does get a cool scene where he chases after Mr. Freeze on a motorbike, though. When it comes to Batman the Animated Series, I think that Robin could be described as a superfluous character. Even when the show was rebranded to The Adventures of Batman and Robin, he mostly played a minor role. We'll never know for certain, but if it hadn't been for the pressure from the TV networks, Robin may not have appeared at all. Despite this, I think that BTAS struck a pretty good balance with their use of Robin. He was there when it made sense for him to be. He wasn't shoehorned in as a box-ticking exercise, and Robin's Reckoning is one of the best episodes from that initial 65-episode run of the show. Robin clearly has his fans, and that's fine. I'm not saying that no one's allowed to like him, but I don't think the show would have been worse without him. When thinking about my favourite episodes, Two-Face, Heart of Ice, Trial, Almost Got Him, Feet of Clay, he's nowhere to be seen and his absence isn't felt. The argument that Batman becomes too grim and dark when Robin isn't around just doesn't hold up when talking about BTAS. Their Batman is a compassionate figure that does his best to help the malcontents of Gotham, and when they refuse to accept his help and change their ways, well, he'll make them change their minds. So, is Robin necessary in Batman the Animated Series? No. But just because he isn't necessary, that doesn't mean he's worthless. His presence allows for more kinds of stories to be told, and as far as I'm concerned, that is a good thing. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. Next time, I'm going to finish off talking about the DCAU's Dick Grayson by looking at how he transitioned from Robin to try to become his own man as Nightwing in the new Batman adventures, and yet somehow failed to get out of Batman's shadow. Hope to see you then.